Okay, with the creative team of Gang AGLEY, the two screenwriters, Jeremy Hogan and Aaron Krygier. Is that how I pronounce your last name? Krygier?
You got it right.
Oh my God, I got it right on. That's it's the first time for everything. So you guys wrote the script to screenplay together. It's a winning thriller suspense film. Have you guys written before? Is this your first time collaborating?
Yeah, I mean, collaborating, yes, but we've both been doing it for a long, long time. Jeremy made a feature long, long time ago, before we even knew each other. We've known each other close to 20 years in some capacity. He wrote a feature back right around 2000, I think it was, without speaking for him. And I made a feature film that I wrote and starred in called Rust Belt Driller, and that was 5 years ago in 2020. And that's actually how we collaborated on this. Jeremy had the idea for a long, long time, and he watched my film and he said, "Come, come fix this up with me and let's make it happen." So here we are.
What's your origin story? Like, how did you guys meet?
We met through a mutual friend, John Wekesar, right, Jeremy?
Weixner, yeah.
Wexner, yeah, yeah. A long time ago, he had known Jeremy before he had known me. We had met at a local film gathering, and we got to know each other a little bit, John and I. And he said, "You got to meet my friend Jeremy. I think you two would get along." And so we did. And then, down the road, years later, here we are.
So who was the who kind of came? Did you guys just like decide, okay, let's write this feature together? Like, how did the seed of this idea come from?
So this idea started in my hands maybe 20 years ago. I wanted to do a neo-noir thriller. And there's a couple of iterations of it. The characters were kind of flat. It was long-winded. I saw Aaron's film and I thought, you can do a genre film and have it still, have like this philosophical thread to it, but still have it be terse and vivid. His first contribution was to cut like 30 pages from it, and I didn't even notice they were gone. And then he layered in a lot of um, character and dialogue work that made the characters, especially the supporting characters, be more fully fledged. And we just batted it back and forth, and you know, uh, I'm pretty pleased with where it landed and how it's doing at the festivals.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Like, so I'll give like the pitch if you guys let me see if it's always good if someone else gives you the pitch and see if I'm on it. So a guy gets out of prison and after 12 years, like 10, 12 years, robbery has gone wrong. That's why he's in prison. But during the robbery, the loot, the money's still there. It's somewhere, right? So he basically wants to, of course, find it. And then there's kind of like other people, like a cop and a female fatale, I guess, and they're all kind of like trying to find the money, I guess, right? So it's all kind of like a mission to find the money. So everybody's kind of good and bad. There's like a kind of like a gray area with all the characters. How's that for a pitch?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. I think The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is my favorite movie of all
Okay.
time. And I know Once Upon a Time in the West is a better Western, and I know Unforgiven is a better Western. Tombstone is probably a better Western. But
It's
I
all
always loved
subjective though, right? So yeah.
it's subjective, but I always loved the fact that each of these guys had a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And they had to work together to a certain point, but then there's going to be an inevitable betrayal. And I think there's some modern films that done something. I mean, back then there's Treasure, Sierra Madre, but Simple Plan, the Sam Raimi film, accomplishes something similar. I think Coen Brothers, have several master classes in how you have these conflicting alliances that have to use one another to a certain point, and then of course they have to
Hmm.
turn on each other because only for some reason one person feels entitled to the loot. And I think to your point, there's good and bad guys in this film, but everybody has a reason they think that they should be the sole owner, and it's worth millions. They could split it. They live in a shithole. This
Yeah.
would change all of their lives if they would just play it straight. And so, in my humble opinion, that's why Mark is the only worthy person to come up with the loot. He's the only one who plays it straight.
and it's there's an analogy. Maybe I'm reaching too much with your script, but there's an analogy for society here, right? Like we're like everybody, it's greed. It's like, and they think that it's going to make them happy. It's think that it's going to make them. It will change their lives for sure, but it's also like, but they think that there's that kind of capitalistic money like thing. And if we all just kind of like, I'm not saying that I'm a socialist, but I'm saying if we all just kind of like help each other out, everybody can be happy, not just one person, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice, insightful way of looking at it. Yeah, I mean, so much of this script is the characters are driven by greed and by self entitlement. You know, by
Yeah.
and so yeah, everybody's kind of gunning at each other, literally, at some point or another. And like Jeremy said, Mark's the only one who is just trying to kind of move on, and then he has no choice but to get sucked back into it.
So
Yeah,
the
nobody
okay, so
abides
the
by the social contract, you know. If everybody just abided by, if they stuck to the original plan, if they stuck to the original deal, they would all be in different places now. You know, in Mark's point of view, he doesn't even really want, he doesn't have to come back to this town. He comes back for the girl. You know, he wants to know if there was anything really there, if she was betraying him all along. So he's got, you know, maybe the least greedy intentions all along.
so like you brought up the Western, there is a kind of Western kind of vibe to your script, of course, right? Like that kind of like that kind of like lone kind of wolf kind of mentality that as you describe good, the bad, and the ugly, that kind of like everybody's gonna has their own set of laws, their own set of rules, right? So yeah, and of course there's like a you called it like neo-noir, like a film noirish kind of vibe to it as well, I guess, right?
Yeah, I would say, you know, some of our mutual influences, like Jeremy had said, Coen Brothers, specifically like Blood Simple, Miller's Crossing, John Sayles' masterpiece Lone Star.
Lone
Um,
Star, yeah, yeah,
yeah, and for me, I'm also a huge Western fan, massive Western fan. Like I grew up on the Magnificent Seven and stuff like that. For me, though, I'm also a huge fan of like urban westerns, like you know, The Way of the Gun by Christopher McQuarrie. And it's funny because I tweeted at him one time, Christopher McQuarrie, that I loved Way of the Gun, and he responded. And he said, "Well, I'm really sorry, but thanks for the compliment because he hates it." But I love that movie, and you know the more recent Hell or High Water by Taylor Sheridan. I mean, all three of his films from the 2010s, Sicario, Hell or
yeah,
High Water, and Wind River are all amazing. But for me, Hell or High Water just sticks out. And there's again kind of a gray area, and there's good guy, bad guy, sort of good guy, sort of bad guy, and that kind of gritty urbanness to it too. So, and this kind of falls in the middle. You know, this isn't exactly urban.
yeah.
It's not exactly completely out in the sticks. It's kind of in the middle. So, yeah, and we kind of proudly wear our influences and inspiration on our sleeve, I think.
Yeah, Hell or High Water. Because it's funny. I was just talking about that film with the person who did the costume design on that film, so
Oh,
it's in my
wow.
mind right now. And it's but that's sort of like a Robin Hood Western, I guess, right? Where like
Yeah,
he's doing it for like his family. He's robbing the rich to give to the poor, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah.
And your guys like these guys are just kind of like you said Mark is like you're saying Mark is the moral center of the film, if there is
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, he's the you know, if there can be one, right? Because they're
Yeah,
all bandits. But to your point, you know, there's layers in westerns of good and bad. It's a boom town, it's a former boom town. You know, so it's got that going on. It's not you know, completely remote the way, you know, the Old West was, but it's remote enough to where this sheriff is kind of the only law and there's no escalation point beyond him. You know, there's a local Lee Van Cleef type gunslinger, you know, hired gun or a Jack Palance type character.
yeah,
You know, and Mark is the Gary Cooper, probably more of a Clint Eastwood, you know, like dubious. You know, he's good, but only in relation to the other characters, right?
yeah. Okay, so what's your guys writing style? Are you guys close? Do you guys live near to each other? Do you guys come go to each other's places, or you guys do it on Zoom? Like what's the process?
We live about 45 minutes away from each other. So we use, Final Draft. We use Celtics a lot for kind of collaborating in real time edits. And we're good friends, so we talk all the time, text, call, whatever the case may be. In the modern world, it's nice that you don't have to go to somebody's place to have to do that. And I think both of us work better without somebody directly over our shoulder.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. I'm not a huge fan of the both in the room dynamic beyond brainstorming. I think it's pretty cool if you can, just kick back and talk about the art of the possible, but I think somebody needs to go hands on the keyboard and then somebody else. And I like the monk-like solitude of doing that. And also the surprise because, um, Aaron and I agree on a lot of things, but we deeply disagree on a lot of other things, which has been a very handy tool. If you take your ego out of the mix and somebody else's point of view comes in and they're like, I don't like what you did here at all, but they replace it with a better idea, that then surprises you when you get that draft back. It's magic when it happens correctly.
so what's the like? But do you guys like go off and write by yourselves? Like, how does the process work in the collaboration?
Yeah, so like Jeremy had said before, the first step for me, once I read it and I was like, okay, I see what's going on here.
Okay.
Um, I'm from a theater background, from like black box plays before even film. I was theater trained, and so my eye is always on what can you do the simplest way possible. What can you get away with? What can you, and not to cheapen things, but just what can we do as indie filmmakers to make this be done realistically? So, yeah, I mean, my first step in the process was slashing it by like 30 or 35 pages and changing out certain things from, in the finale, instead of there being, this whole bus full of people and a truck stop, restroom, and this and that. It's just, well, we do this in a room, just to make things more realistic
Yeah.
and affordable. And, Jeremy was very, very gracious with that. He said, do whatever you think is necessary. That's why I asked you to come in on this with me. And, like he said, he didn't really notice anything was missing, which is a huge compliment. We just, I don't know, certain people just get along really well. And we just get along really well and we understand each other. But that's the biggest thing. And especially even more on Jeremy's part than mine, because it's his original idea. There's no ego between us. We talk, we shoot ideas back and forth. Yeah, that might work. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, cool. And we do agree on a ton of different things, especially our influences. So that makes it easier. But yeah, it's a lot of just back and forth, and then one guy going off and doing something, and then the other guy responding to it. So yeah.
Would you say that each of you have your own strengths and your own like how you can lead, like in terms of plotting, in terms of writing dialogue, character?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would say my strengths are, like I said, making things realistic, making things smaller, but still, on a big scale. I'm very dialogue driven. Harold Pinter's my favorite playwright of all time. Michael Mann is my favorite director of all time. Him and William
Okay.
Friedkin. So, very intricate characters. You talk about Pinter, all of his plays. For Michael Mann, you look at Thief with Jimmy Caan. I mean, it's one of the most detailed, nuanced characters ever created, in my opinion. So those are definitely my strengths. Jeremy's strength, more than anything, is that he looks bigger than I do. He sees a ton of other things, and he always gives me, like, for me, he gives me so many options to consider and think about it. How about this and how about that? I would say our writing styles are actually fairly similar. But Jeremy likes to get a little bigger, likes to get a little more whimsical with it, where I keep it a little more contained. But like he mentioned before, having those two kind of differences with all of our similarities, I think really plays a big part in how we've
I
had
had a
success.
writing instructor who told me, write it as if you have all the money in the world, because it's somebody else's problem if it can't be filmed that way. But that was, 20, 25 years ago when I was
Okay.
working on a script. And I think, to Aaron's point, it's like you can take this more reductionist look at it, the approach, of reducing locations ended up making this more claustrophobic. If the world is too big, it's not easy to collapse in on this guy. But also, if we consider we're considering making this ourselves, so now we have to consider the budget constraints of that,
Sure.
and we don't have all of the money in the world. But I do like to start with all of the whole side of beef, and we'll eventually trim it down to the fillet, but I don't want to lose the fillet.
Okay.
And I don't always know which part of it is the fillet. When I write in my head, I don't always know how the movie's going to end, so I set up multiple endings. In this case, I had a pretty good idea how I wanted it to land, so that was a little bit easier. But there was, maybe three or four more characters in earlier versions of this that just didn't need to be there. They didn't move the plot forward. They were maybe interesting. They were maybe a possibility to set up a subplot, but we don't have 4 hours and $200 million.
Yeah, 100%. And so you guys are planning on making this yourselves? Is that or like ideally?
Yeah, we've got a couple options right now, actually. Doing, like the reason we're here, the script is doing very well. Um, I have my acting coach, Andrew Lewis Caldwell, was just recently on Spider-Man Noir with Nicolas Cage. He's expressed some interest in helping us develop it. We also have a couple other options that are, out there to see what's going on. So we do have some ideas. We were prepared to just try to raise the money ourselves and self-fund it and kickstart and do whatever. But I think the strength of the script and our passion for the project has really shown through. So we do have a couple options out there as well. We're just kind of seeing what comes next.
So would you guys like want to direct it? Because you guys have directing experience, both of you, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've carried this thing in my head for a couple of decades. I feel like I can see every frame of the movie I would make. It is interesting when other people read it, what their interpretation of it is. And we've had a couple of producers and directors who've seen the material on like Inktip and Blacklist, who have their own style and sensibilities. But you could see it being shot like Lone Star, but you can also see it going the other way and going as big as Smoking Aces,
Yeah, I
which
could see
had,
them black and white.
yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, it could absolutely
Yeah,
be. It's an interesting way. Like one of the things I liked about The Lighthouse wasn't just that it was black and white, but he shot it, at like a 4:3 or whatever
yeah,
his aspect ratio was, that made it even more claustrophobic, but it made it seem like a vintage film at the same time.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Because it's a
Natural Born
modern film, but you guys have it's obviously has like tropes of the past too, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it could absolutely. I mean, to your point, we could just make it a Western.
yeah,
They had pocket watches and coins in the Western. It doesn't have to be, modern times. It's kind of in a place that's trapped in time anyway. It used to be
yeah,
the sort of place that you would go upstate and vacation at, but the highway moved and now nobody comes there anymore,
yeah,
you know, and it's that kind of thing. So it can be like a Winter's Bone vibe or Salton Sea or Blue Ruin, and it could lend itself to that. Because it does rely on the tropes of Western and neo-noir,
yeah.
which are, you know, getting on 100 years old.
I like the
Um,
modern kind of twist to it because it's like our it's funny how like we've like a lot of obviously things change in life, but they really don't, right? Like we still have the same issues as humans, right?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah, and that's
greed.
kind of a and that's a thematic idea here too. Time.
Yeah,
Mark's biggest regret is that he's lost all this time
yeah,
and
exactly.
possibilities, and he's not ruminating on the idea of, well, now I'm too old. It's just, well, boy, gee, what if with the girl? Gee, what if this had happened right? Gee, what if with my old partner? Whatever the case may be. So it's a place that's kind of stuck in time. The main character, his big thing is like lost time and what to do next. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, how we
100%.
spend
Like
our
we all
time.
like in the regrets that we have and like in thinking that one big score, and this in this case will kind of like will help us feel better about the regrets we have in life, I guess, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
to your point about the metaphor of society, as a society, we spend all our time either looking back or looking forward and never being
Hmm.
like right here.
Yeah.
And there's when you pick a big theme like time and the futility of trying to catch up to it, or trying to outrun it, it's got a lot of play. And he doesn't want to waste anymore. He's lost 12 years. He's not going to make it back. All of these other people are trying to go back 12 years and like give me what's coming to me. And they've just sat there and rotted for 12 years just like he did, waiting. But
Yeah.
he's been thinking about life is bigger than that. The themes of time and how you spend it, um, love in his case, and moving forward instead of backward.
Yeah, 100%. So you guys got a lot of options, I guess. Like it's like I said, it's doing well. Like is that it must feel good that you're sending it out to strangers, send it out to the world, and people are responding in droves.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, it's a great feeling. The whole point of doing this is to tell stories and for other people to see it. So when other people see it and they respond to it, it's great. It is. It's just a great idea. It's a great feeling.
I always say on things like this that the right people get it, and it's a little bit pretentious to look at it that way, but it's true. You can tell when somebody reads the script and you get the obvious influences. Anybody who's ever watched a Coen Brothers movie is maybe going to pick up on that influence. But when somebody who's like, there's a natural born killers angle to this, or I already said Smoking Aces, but like U-Turn, when they see those other influences that we know are there, Rock West or After Dark, My Sweet, we know those influencers are there,
Yeah.
but we know the right people have read it when they pick up, on those influences.
Yeah, natural born killers. Yeah, that's where I guess we're in the we're Generation Xers, all of us. So basically,
Right.
yeah,
Well, in that case, to Aaron's point about style, so one of the cool things about Natural Born Killers, and it even happened a little bit in Pulp Fiction, was this shameless use of rear projection and these hokey stunts, like when the bullet stops in front of the lady and
yeah,
it spins there in front of the camera for a second before it hits her. That's so ridiculously over the top, but it's
sure,
also cheap to do that. It's not particularly expensive. They used to use rear projection because they couldn't film a night scene in a car. But why couldn't we do the same thing as a style choice? Not because we were forced to. It just
yeah.
also happens to be cheap, you know?
It's so funny that you guys are just talking about this because, like, from a production or directorial standpoint, there's so many ways to take your script.
Hmm.
And because for me, I thought I would just direct it from a grounded point of view. Like it's grounded in reality. Like
Hmm.
this is like whereas Born Killers, even Pulp Fiction is sensationalized, right?
Right.
We're in an alternate universe, so to speak, right? Like
Or
or
somewhere in the middle, like Lone Star, which that's a very gritty, very real story.
yeah,
But his editorial decisions and the transitions from past to present
yeah,
make it dreamy and almost surreal. But
yeah.
there's nothing in that movie that couldn't happen in real life exactly the way John Sayles puts it on the
Oh yeah,
screen.
it's 100%. Yeah, funny. It's I think that was his first movie too. It still holds up today.
Oh, it's fantastic.
But
The
talk about
four,
social commentary
yeah. Oh yeah.
for John Sayles, right? So yeah,
The 4K transfer and everything is
yeah,
gorgeous too.
yeah,
It's just well done. Just
Well,
really
and
well.
it's a power to like to your point of how to do a movie like this.
yeah,
You could do it in very grounded, but he had an all-star cast, just real heavyweight actors and movie stars in the role. Somebody with the access to that kind of money could put those kind of actors, I think one of the things we did as a service was making all of the characters meaty. So you can get character actors who are going to read, Dag or McNary or Damon, and they're like, wow, there's a lot to chew on here. There's a lot for me to really strut and fret about. And uh, on the other end of that, more amateur actors can do it too because the story is there to support them,
yeah.
and the dialogue does so much of the work for them. If they just deliver everything completely straight, it'll still play.
That said, like Lone Star, like they weren't big actors then. That they were all kind of independent people back then, right? Like they weren't like big stars. That he got like he got them all before they became big, I guess, right?
Yeah,
So
that's true. I guess Christopherson would have been the biggest star, but
yeah.
that was a comeback
Yeah,
and
100%. He was
McConaughey.
kind of like the Harvey
Yeah.
Keitel, right? Like
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. Where like he needed them. He needed that film, right? Like and but Chris Cooper was like he was nobody, right? Like not
Yeah,
like
that's where we found out he was good,
yeah,
and
that's
then
where
he,
he exactly like you he found like yeah, he didn't really have much money on that film, so yeah, it's a good way to
that's the
parallel.
beautiful thing about John Sayles is he would write stuff like Piranha 2 so that he could go make a movie like Passion Fish with the money.
Yeah. Yeah, 100. Well, that's what he does, right? He's a ghostwriter. That's he does. Yeah. Well, guys, I really appreciate your time. Like I said, obviously, like sorry about the issues with the camera and stuff like that, and but fantastic script, and I'd really like to see this made into a film. It's like I said, tone wise, it's a really nice pace and nice style. It has a nice little flow to it. So I love to see this made into a film.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you. All
Yeah,
right, let's
thanks a
talk
lot.
again soon when it's made into a film or when you guys make write another award-winning script.
Sounds good to us.
All right.
Sounds